Good afternoon, everyone. The silence has a new texture now. You've noticed it. That particular quality of quiet that descends when a specific presence is removed, not the ordinary quiet of an empty room. Something more deliberate than that, more weighted, the quiet of a decision, of a line drawn somewhere that cannot be easily undrawn. And you're inside it now. Whether you chose it or it was chosen for you, you are inside the silence. And the silence is doing something to you. Something you didn't expect, something that doesn't follow the script you wrote for it in your head. That's what we're sitting with tonight. Let me start with the phone, because no contact lives in the phone in a way that nothing else does. The phone becomes a strange object, ordinary in every other way. Messages from other people, notifications, the noise of a world that keeps moving, and yet carrying an absence so specific it almost has a shape. You pick it up without meaning to, more times than you'd like to count. Not always consciously. Sometimes the hand moves before the mind has given permission. And you're looking at the screen and there is nothing. No name, no message, no sign of the presence that used to fill that space. And the nothing feels louder than anything else on the screen. That's not weakness. That is the nervous system doing what nervous systems do, searching for something it was calibrated to expect, looking for the stimulus that used to arrive and no longer does. Not because you can't function without it, but because the body takes longer than the mind to understand that something has changed. The mind can decide. The body has to be retrained. And that retraining, that slow, unglamorous, deeply uncomfortable process is the real work of no contact, not the decision. The living of it. There are two kinds of people in a no contact situation. The one who initiated it and the one it was initiated on. And I want to speak to both of you tonight because the experience is different radically, specifically different, and yet underneath the difference, there is something that runs through both, something shared, something that neither position protects you from. If you are the one who chose the silence, who made the decision, who drew the line, who put the phone down and meant it, then you already know that choosing is not the same as not feeling. That the strength of the decision doesn't insulate you from the weight of living it. That there are moments, unexpected ones, inconvenient ones, where you miss the thing you chose to leave behind. And that missing feels like betrayal, like your own interior is arguing against you. It isn't, the missing is not evidence that you were wrong. It is evidence that you were real inside something, that you brought yourself fully to a connection that perhaps couldn't hold the fullness of you. And real things, true things, felt things do not stop being felt simply because you've decided they need to stop being fed. And if you are the one the silence was chosen for, if you woke up one day and the contact had stopped and the explanation was insufficient or non-existent, and you have been living in the specific purgatory of not knowing whether to reach out or hold still, I want to stay with you here for a moment. Because that position, the position of being on the receiving end of someone else's silence, has a particular texture that is almost impossible to describe to someone who hasn't felt it. It is not simply missing someone. It is missing someone while simultaneously being uncertain of your own worth in relation to them. It is living inside a rejection that was never fully articulated and so cannot be fully processed because the mind needs edges to work with, needs a shape to grieve, and silence has no edges. It just extends. And into that extending silence, you pour everything: questions, rewound scenes, revised versions of conversations, alternate timelines where you said something different, were something different, understood something sooner, and none of it reaches a conclusion because the silence doesn't answer. The silence just remains. The labyrinth of no contact. I've been thinking about this image in relation to this specific thing. And what strikes me is that the labyrinth of no contact is the first labyrinth where the walls are made of your own thoughts, not of them, not of the history between you, not of the dynamic that led here, but of you alone in the silence, constructing the walls from everything you can't verify, everything you're imagining, everything you're interpreting, in the absence of actual information. The mind cannot sit comfortably in uncertainty. It is not built for it. And so it builds narratives, explanations, stories about what the silence means, what they're thinking, what's happening on the other side of the quiet. Stories that feel like information but are actually just the mind's way of managing the discomfort of not knowing. And the danger, the specific, quiet danger of this labyrinth is that you start to live inside those stories as if they're real, as if the version of events you've constructed in the absence of contact is actually the truth of what's happening. And you make decisions about your worth, about the relationship, about yourself, based on a story that no one confirmed. Hold on. I want to say something that might be uncomfortable. No contact in whatever form it's taken in your specific situation is revealing something not necessarily about the other person, not primarily about the relationship, about you, about what you do when the external input stops, about how you fill the silence, about what you reach for when the reaching toward them is no longer available, about whether, and this is the question underneath all the other questions, you can be your own source of signal when theirs goes quiet. Because here is what no contact does in the dark, beneath the surface of all the missing and the checking and the not checking. It hands you back to yourself, forcibly, without asking if you're ready, without providing a soft landing, just you in the silence, without the ongoing negotiation of their presence to orient around. And that, however terrifying it is in the first days, in the first weeks, is the beginning of something that matters more than getting them back. I want to talk about what's happening on the other side of the silence. Not in them. I can't know that, and neither can you, and that's precisely the point. but on the other side of the silence in you, in the interior, in the place the noise of constant contact used to fill. Something is moving there, quietly, without announcement. The way things always move when the noise stops long enough for movement to be possible. There are thoughts that only come in silence, truths that couldn't find their way through the static of constant contact, feelings that were always there but never had space to surface because the management of the connection took up all the available room. Some of those surfacing things will be painful. Some of what the silence is showing you about yourself, about what you settled for, about what you excused, about where you minimize your own needs to maintain access to theirs, will not be comfortable to look at. Look anyway, gently, without judgment, because the silence is not punishment, even when it feels like it. Even when it arrived without your consent, the silence is information, and you are capable of reading it. The cinder, I think about how much energy goes into the maintenance of constant contact with someone. Not just the obvious energy, the texting, the calling, the showing up, but the invisible energy, the monitoring, the reading of tone, the management of your own presentation in relation to how they seem to be receiving you, the constant small calibrations. Am I too much right now? Am I enough? Did that land wrong? What does that response mean? Why is it taking this long? That is exhausting in a way that is so normalized inside intense connection that you stop recognizing it as exhausting. It just becomes the weather you live in. And then the contact stops. And the exhaustion is still there. But now it has no object. And for a while it just sits in the body with nowhere to go, which is part of why the early days of no contact feel so physically strange. The system is still running at the speed the connection required, and the connection is no longer there to absorb the output. But gradually, if you let it, the system begins to slow. The monitoring quiets. The energy that was going outward starts to collect, starts to become available for something else, something yours, something that had been waiting patiently for the space to become available. The cinder begins to remember what it was before the fire was divided. I'm not sure why, but this feels important to say right now. The version of you that existed before this person, before the contact, before the dynamic, before the specific shape that formed between you, that version did not disappear. It is possible it got quieter, that it receded slightly to accommodate the demands of the connection, that certain parts of you stopped being expressed because they didn't fit or weren't received well or required more energy to maintain than the connection allowed. But it didn't disappear. It was waiting, the way things wait in silence, patient, without urgency, knowing that the door opens eventually. The silence of no contact, however painful its arrival, is that door opening, not toward them, toward you, toward the version of you that was always there underneath the noise of the connection. toward the self that doesn't need their signal to know its own frequency. Let me slow down for a second, because I know that for some of you, what I'm describing feels very far from where you actually are right now. The poetic version of no contact, the growth, the reclaiming, the quiet becoming. That is not what it feels like at day 4 or day 11 or day 23. At day 4, it feels like your chest has been reorganized without your consent. At day 11, it feels like you've forgotten how to be a person who doesn't check. At day 23, it feels like you might have made a terrible mistake, or they might have, or both of you did, and the silence is just confirming something unbearable. All of that is real. All of it is part of the process, and none of it is evidence that the silence is wrong. Only that it is hard, and hard things tend to be the ones worth moving through. The broken key. No contact changes you in ways you cannot fully predict and cannot fully control. It files down certain edges. It sharpens others. It teaches you things about your own capacity for endurance, for grief, for sitting in uncertainty without collapsing it prematurely, that you could not have learned any other way. The person who emerges from the silence, however it ends, whatever happens next, is not the same person who entered it. And the difference, however uncomfortable it was to acquire, is not a wound. It is a precision, a knowing of yourself that only comes from having been alone with yourself long enough to actually meet what's there. That meeting yourself in the silence without the scaffolding of constant contact is the thing no one tells you is coming when no contact begins. And it is ultimately the most important thing that happens. More important than whether they reach out. More important than how it resolves. More important than any external development that may or may not come. You meeting yourself in the quiet, that is what's about to happen. That is what's already happening, whether you've named it yet or not. We're at the end. And I want to close in a place that doesn't promise you anything, because promises belong to a future I cannot see and you cannot control. What I can say is this: the silence is not empty, however it feels, however vast and echoing and uncomfortable it is to inhabit. It is full of something that has been waiting for the noise to stop, full of a version of you that has things to you, about you, for you, that couldn't get through before. Listen for it, not to the noise of what they might be doing or thinking or feeling, not to the story your mind is building to fill the void, but to the quieter signal, the one underneath all of that, the one that sounds, if you get close enough, like your own name spoken in your own voice for the first time in a while. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, trust what you know. 2 questions for the quiet, or for the comments if tonight moved something in you. What has the silence made audible that the noise was covering? And who are you separate from this connection, separate from their presence or absence, when the only voice in the room is yours. Sit with those without rushing, gently. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.